Good morning, everyone. So certainly nice to see everybody in person. I know that we tried to do some of these things virtually, but it's always good to gather back and do it face to face. I lead the account summary portfolio within the product management organization that's looking after some of the screening solutions like Bridger and Compliance Link and Go Insight, Go Trust, as well as the loyalty buy-in data. So I admit I'm a little bit out of practice presenting on a big stage like this. Ender and wander like when I talk, and I didn't realize I'd be so high up. So hopefully I don't trip and fall off the edge. The folks near the table, your job is to break my fall if I get too close and tumble off. Do you want me to switch to the microphone?
Go see.
So I think that was a little bit of static, so hopefully that's better. Okay. So what I'll be talking about today is a bit of an update about what we've been working on with Bridger, some of the things that we've done this past year, and things that we're looking to do moving forward. I really want to do a deeper dive on the things that we're doing with alert management and automated decisioning. So we'll sort of do like a little bit deeper dive into some of that functionality and where we're headed with that. So the first order of business is a quick update on where we are with Bridger XG4. So just to refresh your memory, there's XG4 and XG5. And these things have existed in parallel for the better part of a decade. You might think because of the naming, they're just incremental improvements from one to the other, but they're actually significantly different applications from an architectural and some of the underlying paradigms within the products. And so we've been moving forward over the last few years to XG5 and trying to concentrate our investments there. So we are getting to that point in time where we're reaching the end of life of XG4. You may have noticed over time that it's moved mostly into maintenance mode, where we're just doing incremental changes, maybe bug fixes, maybe some security patches. So we have gotten to that point in time where we've announced the end of life of XG4. So hopefully that's not a surprise to anybody in the audience that is using XG4 or is on that transition to 5. So to the extent that catches you off guard, let's make sure that we huddle up and make sure that we've got you and our account team aligned to make sure that you're doing that transition as gracefully as we can over the course of the next 12 months. Okay, so just wanted to make sure I hit that while we are face to face. Sorry, I'm a bit out of practice with clicking the button. So hopefully there we go. So this is a slide about the work that we've done over the past year. So one big area of focus that it's been for us is supporting the WorldCompliance Plus version on Bridger XG5. So WorldCompliance Plus is a modernized version of the schema, the layout, compared to the legacy version of WorldCompliance. So there's a lot of details there, that really warrant its own session, so I won't go too far deep into it. But there were some limitations with the legacy version of WorldCompliance in the layout that we weren't able to expose the richness and the breadth of the data that we had at our disposal. Okay, like an example might be the date of birth. Across the different sources, the different segments, there's a multitude of date of birth values from those sources. But the legacy version of WorldCompliance sort of constrains you on how many you can expose, right? We can only expose a fixed number. And so you're left with that dilemma of which ones of that subset should we expose. Is it a first in, first out paradigm? Is it about the quality of the sources? So across our global client base, different clients have different perspectives on the decision criteria to use in that filtering process. With WorldCompliance Plus and that modernized layout, we get around all that and can expose the full breadth of that information. And it just enables a sharper scalpel to build your configurations and your predefined searches to take better advantage of the data with the intent of better alert management, reduction of alerts. Okay, so there's a lot of work going on there. We've started rolling that out with beta clients. And now we're getting to the point where it's becoming generally available. We'll start with net new clients on Bridger. They'll be on board with WorldCompliance Plus. And then we'll look to engage our existing clients to start thinking about that transition. It's not a seamless process. It's not an automatic thing where you just one day come in and you've been migrated. There is some work that we need to do. We may need to engage with the services organization and then obviously make sure we do that healthy, robust set of testing to make sure everything is to folks' liking. Okay, so there's a lot of details there, but that's where we are. The next reference there is to the ISO 20022 updates, the Swift updates. So for folks that are using Bridger for payment screening, we're simply supporting that new standard as it rolls out. We've been incrementally supporting the payment message and the message types there based upon some prioritization feedback we get from our clients and rolling that incrementally over the past 3 or 4 service releases. Okay, so pretty straightforward, but to the extent that people are using it for payment screening, that'll be something that we support. And the last item here, the automatic false positive. This is a large body of work. We'll kind of spend a lot of time for the rest of my segment talking about this topic. So there's some technical aspects to it where we're making more efficient use of the storage, trying to reduce duplication. So for people that are using the service environments, that should translate into better performance and more responsiveness. For those folks that are using the on-prem version, the enterprise version, should enjoy some reduced storage costs. But tethered to all of that is a number of features that we've been working on that we'll sort of talk about on the next few slides. And then there's just been a whole host of technical and architectural security improvements behind the scenes. So these are the things that we should all be taking for granted. Sort of our job as a vendor is to make sure that these things are there when you need them and performant. About a year ago, we had a few missteps, particularly around batch in our service environment. And so we've made a lot of investments to get out in front of that. Okay, so there's just a general reference there to capacity and performance improvements, particularly around batch. Done a lot of work in terms of how the batch files are prioritized across the global client base. So as an example, we were having some smaller batch files that were more operational in nature, where clients needed those things to be processed quickly to dovetail into whatever their operational process was. But those were getting stuck behind very large periodic rescreening batches. So we've been able to segment this and prioritize things, route them to different servers based upon the type of screening that we're doing and the size of the file to try to balance those things more elegantly. A lot of work has been going on with how do we migrate from XG4 to XG5. So again, they're different applications, and there are some inherent differences there about the data model and how things are set up. And so we've done a lot of work building the rails to try to make that transition easier and more seamless for clients. Okay, so it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's been a major area of our focus as we've been approaching that end of life event. Next, there's a discussion here about the LexisNexis cloud strategy. We do have 2 data centers in the United States. and the Boca data center, we're working towards moving that to the cloud, to Azure. So there's a very large LexisNexis strategic transformation about moving from a self-hosted model to the cloud. So before we do that, we want to make the architectural and design changes in the application to be able to fully leverage the benefits of the cloud. So we're doing that containerization and enabling the application to take advantage of things like auto-scaling, where the capacity and the processing power allocated to the system can dynamically shrink and expand as the demands ebb and flow. So that'll help with some of the other things I mentioned about 5 minutes ago about capacity, particularly around batch processing, that hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of. The final reference on here is about webhooks. I don't know how familiar you are with this. It's a technical concept. So historically, as alerts are getting generated and those are getting worked through the dispositioning process, clients are pinging the Bridger application, the Bridger system, trying to see if there's been an update to the status of that alert. And so it is a API call to get those results. And you're sort of pinging the system continuously. Is there an update? Is there an update? Is there an update yet? So you can see that can actually result in a bit of a denial of service attack, right? If a client inadvertently configures that to be too aggressive. Like we've had examples where people were checking multiple times a second. So webhooks is a different design paradigm where you are pushing notifications instead of the clients having to pull an API. So when there's an update, we will push the update, push the notification to you. So it makes everybody's life a little bit simpler. It's a more elegant way to solve the problem. And again, we have self-interest in it in that it helps protect the system and protects the capacity for things like batch processing and other screening demands. Okay, so that's we're looking to roll that out in the near future. It's a bit delayed. We had hoped to be done with that this year, but it looks like it's going to slip into next year. All right, so that's the bulk of the work that we've been working on. As we look forward, I'm just doing a quick time check because I tend to ramble, so I haven't developed that feel to make sure that we're on schedule. So I'm going to try to keep us on schedule. So we're going to continue to roll out the ISO 20022 updates for Swift and Fedwire. So that'll just be incremental work that will chip away at a series of releases in the first 6 months of the year. And then, looking to support something that's called the entity resolution filter. I'll talk a little bit about it. I'll refer to it as ERF. But it's going to be part of our discussion here about alert management. A lot of the alert management and automated decisioning that we do in Bridger today is a rules-based paradigm. The entity resolution filter, is more of taking an approach of a model to understand the risk and help streamline not only the routing of those alerts and the management of those alerts that we build our operational processes around, but what sort of exceeds our thresholds for concern. So again, it's more of a model approach as opposed to a rules-based approach. I have some more slides at the end where I'll dive more deeply into that. But that is a feature that is coming from the Acuity merger. So to refresh everybody's memory, about 18 months ago, LexisNexis Risk Solutions merged with its sister company, Acuity. And so now we've really brought together in this superset of subject matter expertise and technical capabilities and a lot of wisdom that's been built over time solving similar problems. So, the real benefits here is we've really brought all these things together. And over the last 18 months, we're starting to try to push the features, the intellectual property, the unique ways of solving these problems across the portfolio. So ERF is something that came from Acuity that we're now trying to push into the various screening products in our portfolio. So we're looking to add that to Bridger in the future. And I think throughout the day, you'll hear other updates about how that is being pushed to other screening solutions like continuity and more. Okay, so I'll talk more about that. And then obviously we're continuing to work on the capacity, the quality, making sure that, our role as a vendor is we're making sure that the system is performant there when you need it to be. Again, something that we should all just be taking for granted. Eventually, we'll actually be executing on the movement of the data center. So from the Boca data center to Azure, that'll be, coming upon us in about a year, 18 months. You'll hear more from us. Those of you that are using the service environment sort of coordinate that, but that'll be a body of work that we work on together. Okay, so now let's get into some of the discussion about the functionality that we have around automated decisioning to try to help with alert management. So specifically, I want to dive into this feature that we've been working on. It's been available. We've been making some incremental improvements to it, called the Intelligent Match Decision solution. So it's meant to replace the legacy Bridger AFP automatic false positive functionality. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is, the legacy functionality, because we need a good foundation for talk about the limitations of it so that you can see with IMDS how we try to solve that problem more intelligently. Okay, and then that'll provide a springboard to go into a little bit deeper dive about ERF. I think it's pretty obvious the problem that we're trying to solve, especially with the Russian sanctions. The volume of alerts is obviously skyrocketing. And so, we see our job as trying to help come up with innovative ideas to streamline that alert management process and help provide some capability for automated decisions, just so that allows your team to focus on that subset of alerts that really warrant the deeper thinking. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. So the legacy functionality in Bridger, some of you may be using this today, right? It's limited. I mean, just to be direct about it, right? So these are pre-configured. There's very little customization. You're just able to toggle which data elements are within the scope of the feature on and off. I mean, there is a little bit of customization around the date of birth tolerance, but generally speaking, it's very binary, with not a lot of latitude for fuzzy matching and complex rules. So this is an example about a limitation that I think makes the justification for the IMDS functionality more clear. So with the legacy AFP feature, if you have a situation where if you want to take a name match that has a date of birth match, but the gender is mismatched and you want to automatically disposition that as a false positive, like you can't do that with the legacy feature. And that's why we build IMDS. So if we go into the next slide and look at the screen, like it wasn't intuitive to me, like when I started getting involved with Bridger, how this feature works, right? And if we read the words that are on Bridger, that in the interface as you like set this up, right? It says, set an automatic false positive status when the name matches, but at least one of the following data elements does not. Okay, so that last bullet point really sort of hits it. If there's a conflict between, I'm just trying to advance this to an example. But if we're matching on multiple data elements, we can no longer generate that AFP, right? So in this example, if we have a name match, but a gender mismatch, we can disposition that as an AFP. But if the name matches and the address matches with that gender mismatch, we can no longer do that, right? So that's counterintuitive to me. I don't know if it's the same for you, right? But it almost generates a disincentive for clients to share more personal information, more data inputs to Bridger, right? Because you start to game the system, like you're not getting the automated decisioning levels that you would like because the address is matching in addition to the name. And so maybe you're incentivized to like stop submitting address to work within the confines of the feature as it exists, right? And when we do data science and data analytics, like that's the opposite, right? We should be looking at more data elements to have that more nuanced and sophisticated assessment. So this is kind of creating a disincentive to that. Okay, so the intelligent match decision solution, we're leveraging the data and the attributes that we can generate around the input data, the information from the watch list, and the data elements that come out of the search core itself. Okay, there's bits of intelligence and wisdom that come out of the search core assessment that we can leverage. Okay, so fundamentally, IMDS works the same way as that AFP legacy functionality, in that we're evaluating the matches that come out of search core. We're doing that comparison of the elements, and if it meets our criteria, we're automatically closing the status of that as an AFP. And we can build the IMDS rules in a few different ways, right? It can be generated from just your expert knowledge, your policies, like transform those into the rules engine. Or we can take a more analytic approach where we have data science look at your historical alerts and then recommend the IMDS configuration that would most closely replicate what you've done manually over time. In my experience, we haven't seen many people take that approach. More, what we've seen more is people are just taking their expert rules and just translating them into the IMDS features, which actually surprised me a little bit. But we can talk a little bit more about that when we get into the ERF discussion. So those business rules are simply articulated in an XML format, and then that XML file is loaded into Bridger via the enterprise manager to take advantage of. And so now we have a more detailed example that really sort of shows that complex logic that we can now take advantage of within IMDS. So in this example, we have an adverse media search. If the name is a good match, as defined by that match score, the address is a partial match. We're missing a DOB match just because the watch list didn't contain that. And there's a gender conflict. Let's close that alert as an AFP. Okay, so you can see how we've now evolved to a little bit sharper of a scalpel that can be taken advantage of and hopefully reduce some of that workload. And as we build through here, we're just sort of talking about the different attributes that are at your disposal. So again, with IMDS, the more data you provide, the more power there is, right? The more sophisticated we can make those business rules and hopefully zero in on a more optimal way on automated decisioning. It works across the customer lifecycle. I mean, it's a lot of words that basically what we're trying to say there is this is tailored to screening individuals as opposed to entities or businesses. Okay. Sorry, I just blew past that. This is very difficult for everybody to read, especially in the back of the room, but just wanted to show some of the attributes that are available to IMDS as you build those rules. So again, it's a wide swath of things from the input data, what's available from the profile data, and then the attributes that are coming out of Search Core. Things about like the quality of the name matching. Is there things like gender conflict, date of birth conflict? So, over time, we will look to add to this list to kind of continue to build this out. Certainly would like input from clients as they get more familiar with it about where they think that focus should be. But this is where we are now. So again, IMDS has been available for some time now. We've made some incremental improvements to it. We haven't seen the adoption of it like we had anticipated. So I'm still trying to get to why that is. And it might be for an interesting discussion that we might have later in the day, more one-on-one. It's unclear to me whether or not we've done a good job educating our clients about that this exists and helping them understand the value, helping them understand how to leverage it, maybe supporting them with the right professional services engagement. Or, do folks really understand it and it's not fit for purpose? It doesn't solve the problems. Have we missed it, right? So, this isn't the right format, I think, to engage in that dialogue, but just know we're interested in having that conversation. So for folks that are unfamiliar with it, I think the next step is to get in touch with your account team and let's have a deeper dive on it and what it would take. For those that are familiar with it and have decided it's not for them, like if you could figure out a way to have that conversation with us, to give us that feedback so that we can, just realign around it and make sure that we're working on the things that are useful and valuable. Okay. This is just telling us about after you've built the XML file that articulates those IMDS rules, you just are simply loading it into the enterprise manager. Okay, so let's move forward into like more future looking. I sort of teased that concept of the entity resolution filter. Again, it's a really interesting approach that came with the Acuity merger that we're trying to push throughout the portfolio. So it's meant to, I think, complement what we just talked about with automated decisioning. So let me tell you a little bit more about what it is, and then we can go from there. So when we think about the risk of an alert that comes out of Search Core or out of the FERCO filter, like we can do a certain amount of assessment about that to get a more granular and nuanced view of the risk, right? So the first dimension of that is what we call the strength index. And this is a measure of how likely it is that the input data is a true match for a record on the watch list. Okay, so just how likely is it that this is the same individual? And the interesting part of this is, what goes into that assessment, right? So again, it's more of a model approach as opposed to a rules-based interrogation. Like the example that resonates with me that I like to use when I talk about it is, even if it's a name match, taking into account, this first column here, it might be hard to see in the back about the name frequency score. So it could be a good name match, but is it John Smith, which in the United States is a common name? Or is it like Brian Knaus? Like I am the only Brian Knaus in the United States, to my knowledge. So, if we have a match there, it's much more likely to be the same individual compared to an example of a very common name where there's a much greater possibility of coincidence. Okay, so taking things like that into account. And, all of this is hand-tuned in these models with ERF today. And the paradigm is around making it explainable to regulators, making it transparent. Okay, so just making sure that it's defensible. Okay, so the way that that process unfolds in terms of looking at sample data and building that model and then hand tuning it goes hand in hand with the documentation, the artifacts, and the